before I go any further with this build, I thought I'd show you the other build I'm currently doing on the other side of the house. It's very similar in structure on how I built this, so I thought I'd probably best off showing a little bit more in finer details on how I built the framework. However, well, it's another day, another build, and I have this beauty to knock down, left behind by the previous owner. I mean, look at it. What this bit here joins through that bit, that bit, that bit and that bit to make it into one solid bit, to make the thing stand in its current position. I'm surprised this hasn't blown away yet. I think it was an elderly chap that used to live here, and he had too much time on his hands and obviously spent a lot of time in skips, and this is the result from them spending too much time in the skips. If it's anything like the other one, I dread to think what's inside that roof. There'll be bits of old jacket, all sorts in there. Anyway, let's get it knocked down, and in its place is going to be a new one. I hope this isn't a bad idea. I've only just built that shed. Yeah, it's going to come down. Oh, it's alright. Oh, right, okay. Yeah, well, yeah, it's better to go. Thanks for asking up. That's one way to introduce yourself to the neighbours. Right, I'm going to cut this up and get it shifted. And as you can see, I have cleared the area from the old shelter, so I managed to chop it down. To be fair, it was built better than the last building, whatever it was. Upon the brickwork there was a framework. I removed that as well, which left a layer of paint and bitumen upon the brickwork, so I've had to clean that off as well. Just where the green tape mark is my 2.5 metre height limit. Now, I can't go beyond 2.5 metre for the whole of the roof because I'm within 2 metres of the boundary fence, so I will be building it a little bit lower than the 2.5 metres because I've got some solar panels to go on top of this roof, or that's the plan for the future anyway. It's time to fix the posts within the ground. Now, I don't imagine I'm going to entertain using the pickaxe for very long because, as you can see, there's concrete on the ground. So I'm going to pull out my air compressor and use my air chisel to break up what concrete there is upon the ground for the holes. I'm going to dig out 4 holes to a depth of around about 3 feet. So it's going to be done like how I've done on the workshop. Once I've got down to the level of 3 feet, I'm going to infill and compact some hardcore to around about 6 inches, cap off with some concrete to another level around about 3 inches, so there's be a 9 inch level of hardcore and concrete, so the post can sit on top of that and not sink within the ground. After I've done that and left the concrete to dry off overnight, following day I'll come along, place each post within each hole and top off with post mix concrete and let that dry off over a few days and come back to it again. Once the concrete has set the posts within the ground, I can level off each post so they're all at the same height, around about 2.4 metres. That's the plan anyway. Now, as you see before you, I have made this structure upon the floor because I thought it would be far more easy to make it on the floor then hang it into place. I have done a lot of painting. Around about 25 litres of paint has been applied upon this structure, so that's 5 coats of charcoal grey paint. I have done a lot of measuring. I have measured twice to make sure everything's the right length. I have done a lot of cutting, a lot of sawing and a lot of chopping create this. Now if I go underneath, just crawl underneath it. Now obviously I'm not going to be able to lift this structure as in one piece. It does come apart. I've done a lot of measuring to make sure things like these lats are stabilised, these roof trusses in place, slide into various places upon these roof trusses. Everything's been cut out so I can disassemble down here and reassemble up there. These roof trusses here will just slot and slide into position. I will be gluing them into position, I will be bolting them into position and also nailing. And on this side I've used the same piece of timber as that side, so it's all the same measurements. And that is the anchor point that will be fixed upon the house. Now I have drilled and countersunk 9 holes within that piece of timber, and there will be 8mm bolts that will be going through the piece of timber here and within the wall of the house to fix it upon the wall. I've also nailed into position around about 2 foot apart from each other these hanger joists. So simply when I come to put it all together, these will just slide into those hanger joists there and nailed into position. So as you can see, I've got this anchor point here started on 1 bolt, M8 bolt like this, and obviously in theory all these holes want to be matching the holes that's within the wall. Now if I've done my job right, they should all fit. On the other side of this timber I have just applied some grab adhesive so it can grab onto the wall as well, and also just to seal it off from the elements. And we're going to do this, just on the step ladder that way. And hopefully this thing's going to go pretty tall. Yes, that lines up. That's a good start. However, I do have to intervene in between this video because I had a bit of an accident whilst filming this B-roll footage. I tripped over the roof trusses that were left leaning on the gate just on the other side of the carport, and unbeknown to me I pulled out the jack plug for the microphone that was connected to the camera, so I lost all of the sound for that day. So I'll have to do a bit of a walkthrough from here. Having successfully mounted the anchor point to the house, I then moved on to the anchor point which was going to be fitted on top of the posts. Now I left it floating, I did not bolt it into position because what I wanted to do is make sure I could make fine adjustments to the framework or the roof, then bolt the anchor point on top of the posts. After lifting the anchor point into position, I moved on to the roof trusses and lifted each one of those roof trusses into position into the allocated locations upon the anchor points. I then moved on to the horizontal lats that will be supporting those roof trusses. Once the framework was roughly in its position, I could then make fine adjustments, making sure everything was squared off on the roof's framework. Once satisfied that everything was squared off on the roof's framework, I could then commit to bolting the anchor point onto the posts. Then I moved on to the roof's framework where I glued, nailed, screwed and bolted the rest of the framework together. Having the framework all built and secured into position, I then moved on to making the roof waterproof. Now I'm not going to use the same type of material I've used on top of this roof. I'm going to use corrugated sheets. Now, as you can see, it's quite silver, and I thought it might be a bit of an eyesore for the adjacent neighbours, so I had to dull the colour off a bit. So to each roof sheet I sanded down, then applied special primer upon that roof sheet. After that primer had dried off, I applied some charcoal grey paint on top of that, just to dull off the sheet, left to dry. Once the paintwork had dried off, I could then lift the roof sheets into their position. One thing I did have in mind though, the wind direction. On a windy day, it is quite exposed on this side of the house. So when I laid the roof sheets on top of the framework, I made sure I laid them so they overlap each other like this. So the wind direction is coming from this way. There's no way the wind could get underneath the corrugated sheets and tear them off from the framework of the roof. Once each roof sheet was laid out and squared off to the roof's framework, I then nailed down each roof sheet to the roof's framework. Having fitted the tin roof to the framework of the building, I then moved onto the edging of the framework of the roof. 3 edges that's exposed to the elements, and I applied a fascia board to each of those 3 edges upon the roof's framework. Now I do have a couple of jobs outstanding on this carport, and that is the bracing for the anchor point here and the legs it stands upon. I'm undecided to whether just to screen off most of this wall, which would act as a bracing. If not, if I leave it open, I will put some bracing here to the anchor point here. And the other job that's outstanding still is the flashing for the roof. I've not got around to doing that yet, but it will be done probably spring sometime next year. I've not seen any damp issues yet, so I'll risk it during the winter months. Other than that, that is pretty much how I built the framework for the carport and the workshop. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. As with my first attempt, I was using a standing knife to cut the boards, but it doesn't leave a clean edge. So I've decided to use a wood saw that comes out. Whoa! What have we learnt today? Well, I've learnt today I am not a plasterboarder. My first attempt was horrendous. 4 hours it's taken me to get this cable through this bloody wall. 4 hours.